The golden African sun cast long shadows across the presidential palace in Ouagadougou as Ibrahim Traore reviewed the morning briefings. At 35, he was one of the youngest heads of state in the world, having risen to power through a military coup that promised to rid Burkina Faso of corruption and foreign interference. His weathered hands, scarred from years of military service, traced over intelligence reports about terrorist activities in the northern provinces. "Papa, you promised we'd go to the market today." Traoré looked up to see his 12-year-old daughter. Amina bouncing into his office, her school uniform slightly wrinkled, backpack slung over one shoulder. Her bright smile was infectious, momentarily lifting the weight of governance from his shoulders. "Amina, what have I told you about knocking first?" he said with mock sternness, though his eyes sparkled with affection. "But, Papa, you're always busy with boring papers. When will you have time for me?" She moved closer, peering at the documents. Spread across his mahogany desk, Traoré quote, S.Y. Fatima appeared in the doorway, her elegant presence commanding immediate attention. "Ibrahim, she has a point. You've been working 18-hour days for months. Even presidents need family time." He glanced at his watch. 7:30 a.m. His first official meeting wasn't until 9 o'clock. Perhaps he could spare an hour. "All right, my princess. But just for an hour. And then you're off to school." He stood up, his military posture relaxing as he embraced. His daughter, Dot. The drive to the central market took 20 minutes through the bustling streets of Ouagadougou. Traoré sat in the back of his armored vehicle with Amina, listening to her chatter about her friends, her favorite teacher, and her dreams of becoming a doctor. His security detail, 4 vehicles with 12 armed guards, maintained a discreet but vigilant presence. Colonel Ousmane Diallo, his most trusted advisor and head of security, spoke into his radio from the passenger seat. "Eagle has landed, proceeding to market zone. All units maintain positions." The market was alive with the sounds and smells of West Africa. Vendors calling out their wares, the aroma of grilled meat and spices, children laughing as they darted between stalls. Amina held her father's hand tightly, her eyes wide with excitement as they browsed colorful fabrics and handcrafted jewelry. "Papa, look at this." Amina pointed to a beautiful wooden carving of an elephant. The elderly vendor, recognizing the president despite his casual clothes, bowed respectfully. "Mr. President, it would be my honor to gift this to your daughter," the vendor said. In broken French, Traoré smiled, but firmly placed money on the counter. "Thank you, my friend, but a fair price for honest work is always the right way." As they moved through the market, Traoré noticed the genuine affection from his people. Children waved, women ululated their approval, and men nodded with respect. This was why he had taken power, not for personal gain, but to serve these people who had suffered under corrupt leadership for decades. "Papa, can we get some mangoes for Mama?" Amina asked, tugging on his sleeve. "Of course, little one." They approached a fruit vendor's stall, and Traoré was selecting the ripest mangoes when his phone buzzed urgently. The special tone indicated a message from his intelligence chief. "Priority Alpha. One moment, Amina." He stepped aside and read the message. "Intercept indicates possible threat to family. Recommend immediate return to palace." Traoré's military instincts kicked in immediately. He scanned the crowd, noting his security team's subtle but increased alertness. Colonel Diallo was already moving closer, speaking rapidly into his radio. "Amina, we need to go now," Traoré said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "But Papa, we just got here. And you promised—" "I know, sweetheart, but something urgent has come up. We'll come back tomorrow, I promise." As they moved toward the vehicles, Traoré noticed a commotion near the main entrance to the market. A group of men in traditional robes was arguing with local police. His security detail was already repositioning, creating a protective corridor. "Sir, we need to move. Now." "Colonel." Diallo's voice was tense. They were 50 meters from their vehicle when the first explosion rocked the market. The blast came from behind them, near where they had been standing just moments earlier. Screams filled the air as people scattered in all directions. "Down! Everyone down!" Diallo shouted, pulling Traoré and Amina toward a concrete barrier. More. Explosions followed. 3, 4, 5 in rapid succession. Smoke began to fill the air as vendors abandoned their stalls and fled in panic. Traoré shielded Amina with his body, his mind racing through possibilities. This was too coordinated to be random violence. "Papa, I'm scared," Amina cried, pressing her face against his chest. "It's okay, my brave girl. Papa's here. We're going to be fine." Through his earpiece, Traoré could hear frantic radio chatter from his security teams. "Multiple explosive devices, casualties reported, possible coordinated attack, recommend immediate evacuation." Colonel Diallo crawled over to them, his face grim. "Sir, we have a problem. The explosions were diversions. Our intelligence was right. This was targeted." "What do you mean?" "3 of our security vehicles have been disabled. Someone knew our exact route, our positioning, everything. This was planned specifically to separate us." As if on cue, Traoré's phone rang. "Unknown number." "Don't answer it," Diallo warned. But something in Traoré's gut told him this call was the real reason for everything that had just happened. He accepted the call and put it on speaker, motioning for Diallo to listen. "Mr. President," an electronically distorted voice spoke in perfect French, "I trust you and your daughter are unharmed. That was merely a demonstration of our capabilities." "Who is this?" Traoré demanded. "Someone who has your undivided attention. Look around, Mr. President. See how easily we could have killed you both? But we didn't, because dead presidents can't make decisions." The smoke was beginning to clear, and Traoré could see the devastation around them. Overturned stalls, scattered merchandise, people tending to the wounded. But remarkably, despite the chaos, there appeared to be no fatalities, only minor injuries. From the panic. "What do you want?" Traoré asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Soon, Mr. President, very soon, you will receive instructions. And when you do, I suggest you follow them exactly. Your daughter's life depends on it." The line went dead. Diallo was already coordinating with his teams for evacuation, but Traoré remained frozen, staring at his phone. The voice had been disguised, but something about the precise pronunciation, the choice of words, felt familiar. "Sir, we need to move." "Now," Diallo urged. As they made their way to the remaining functional vehicle, Amina clutched her wooden elephant tightly. "Papa, why did those bad men hurt people?" Traoré looked down at his daughter, so innocent, so trusting that her father could protect her from anything. How could he explain that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who betray us? How could he tell her that someone wanted to use her as leverage against everything he stood for? Sometimes, sweetheart, there are people who don't like the good changes we're trying to make, but don't worry. Papa won't let anything happen to you. But even as he spoke those words, Ibrahim Traore knew that his life, his presidency, and everything he had worked for was about to be tested in ways he had never imagined. Back at the presidential palace, Traore paced his secure office while his crisis team assembled. The morning's market attack had shaken everyone, but it was clear this was just the beginning. His phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from international allies, domestic ministers, and media outlets seeking statements about the terrorist attack in downtown Ouagadougou. But Traore knew better. This wasn't terrorism in the traditional sense. This was psychological warfare, carefully orchestrated and personally targeted. "Sir, we've completed our preliminary analysis," Colonel Diallo announced as he entered with a stack of files. Behind him came General Hassan Sankara, the Minister of Defense, and Dr. Marie Cohn, the Director of National Intelligence. "What do we know?" Traore asked, not pausing in his pacing. Dr. Cohn opened her tablet and began reading. The explosions were small, precisely placed charges, designed to create chaos and panic, not mass casualties. Professional-grade materials, military timing. Someone with significant resources and expertise orchestrated this. Internal or external? Traoré asked. That's what worries me, General Sankara interjected. The level of intelligence required to know your exact movements, security protocols, timing, this suggests insider knowledge. Are you suggesting someone in my inner circle? Traoré's phone rang, cutting him off. The same unknown number from the market. This time, he immediately put it on speaker for the entire room to hear. Mr. President, I trust you've had time to consider the morning's events. Are you ready to listen? I'm listening, Traoré replied, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. Good. First, let me clarify something. Your daughter is not currently in our custody. She is safe, under your protection, but that can change very quickly. Dr. Cohn was already working on her laptop, attempting to trace the call, while Colonel Diallo gestured to his communications team to begin recording everything. However, the voice continued, we have demonstrated our ability to reach you anywhere, anytime. The market was child's play compared to what we're capable of. What do you want? Traoré demanded. Patience, Mr. President. First, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Turn on Channel 7 News, now. General Sankara grabbed the remote and switched on the large-screen television mounted on the wall. Channel 7 was already broadcasting breaking news about the market incident, but suddenly the regular programming was interrupted. A new image filled the screen, grainy security camera footage of Traoré and Amina at the market that morning. The SAR timestamp showed it was recorded just minutes before the explosions, but this wasn't footage from any official security cameras. As you can see, the voice explained, we have been watching you for quite some time. We know your routines, your security protocols, your daughter's school schedule, your wife's charitable activities. We know everything. The footage switched to different angles. Amina at her school playground, Fatima at the hospital where she volunteered, Traoré himself in supposedly secure locations within the palace. Someone had been conducting comprehensive surveillance for months. Now that we have established our credibility, the voice continued, let me explain what we want. You will receive a detailed list shortly, but here are the key points. Traoré felt his stomach drop. This was the moment he had been dreading. First, you will immediately release all 127 prisoners currently being held in Ouagadougou Central Prison on terrorism charges. This includes the 15 high-value targets captured in your recent northern operations. Absolutely not, Traoré snapped. Those men are responsible for killing dozens of innocent civilians. Second, the voice interrupted coldly, you will withdraw all military forces from the northern provinces and cease all counter-terrorism operations indefinitely. General Sankara made a choking sound. Sir, that would leave the entire region defenseless against. Third, you will publicly announce the suspension of all mining agreements with Western companies and hand over control of the gold mines to, let's call them, local administrators. Dr. Cohn looked up from her laptop, her face pale. They're asking him to essentially surrender the country's sovereignty. And finally, the voice concluded, you will do all of this within 72 hours. To demonstrate your compliance, you will begin with the prisoner release, tonight, by midnight. This is insane, Traoré said. These demands would destroy everything we've worked to build. The security situation alone would be unfortunate, yes, but not as unfortunate as what would happen to your daughter if you refuse. The television screen changed again, now showing real-time footage of Amina's school. Children were playing in the courtyard during recess, and the camera zoomed in on his daughter, laughing with her friends, completely unaware that she was being watched. "We can reach her any time, Mr. President. A poisoned juice box, a car accident. On the way home, a gas leak at the school. Accidents happen so frequently to children. It would be such a tragedy." Traoré felt his world collapsing. The room around him seemed to spin as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. He could meet these demands and watch his country slide back into chaos and foreign exploitation, or he could refuse and lose the most precious thing in his life. "You have 72 hours, Mr. President. A detailed list of names and instructions will be delivered to your palace within the hour. We will be monitoring your compliance closely." "Wait," Traoré called out. "How do I know you'll honor your word? How do I know that once I meet your demands, you won't just—" "Because, Mr. President, dead martyrs are much more dangerous than living compromised leaders. We don't want you dead. We want you controllable. Meet our demands, and your daughter lives a long, happy life. Refuse and, well, you've seen enough tragedy in your military career to imagine the alternatives." The line went dead. The room was silent except for the continued news coverage on the television. Traoré collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. In all his years of military service, all the battles he had fought, all the impossible decisions he had made, nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Sir," Colonel Diallo said quietly, "we can increase security around Amina immediately. Full protection detail, safe house—" "They've been watching us for months," Traoré interrupted. "They know our protocols, our safe houses, our people." "Where exactly would be safe?" General Sankara leaned forward. "Mr. President, we cannot give in to these demands. The ramifications for national security alone—" "Don't you think I know that?" Traoré exploded, his composure finally cracking. "Don't. You think I understand what releasing 127 terrorists means? What withdrawing from the North means? What giving up our mining rights means?" He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. Somewhere out there, his daughter was playing, trusting that her father would always protect her. But what kind of father am I if I choose politics over my child's life? What kind of man? Dr. Cohn spoke up softly. "Mr. President, we don't even know who's behind this. Without knowing their true identity or motivation—" "It doesn't matter," Traoré said, turning back to face his team. "What matters is that they have demonstrated the capability and willingness to carry out their threats. The market attack was just a warning. Next time, people will die." A knock at the door interrupted them. Traoré's secretary entered, holding a sealed envelope. "Mr. President, this was just delivered by courier." Traoré took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. The complete list. "Remember, midnight tonight for the first release. We are watching." As he inserted the USB drive into his computer, Traoré realized that the next 72 hours would determine not just his daughter's fate, but the future of his entire nation. The list that appeared on screen contained names he recognized. Dangerous individuals whose release would almost certainly lead to renewed violence and instability. But at the bottom of the document was a single photograph that made his blood run cold. Amina, taken through her bedroom window just that morning as she got dressed for school. The message was clear. They could reach her anywhere, anytime. Ibrahim Traore, the man who had overthrown a government and rebuilt a nation, had never felt so powerless in his life. 10 hours had passed since the ultimatum, and the presidential palace had transformed into a war room. Maps covered every surface, secure phones rang constantly, and the weight of impossible decisions hung heavy in the air. Traoré had called an emergency session with his closest advisors, but as the clock approached 10 p.m., they were no closer to a solution. "The international community is pressing for a response," Foreign Minister Amina reported as she entered the secure conference room. The French ambassador has called 3 times. The UN Security Council is convening an emergency session, and the African Union wants a statement by morning. What are we telling them? Asked Dr. Cohn. Nothing yet, Traoré replied, staring at the list of names on the screen. How can I explain that we're being blackmailed? That the president of Burkina Faso is being held hostage by his own love for his daughter? Colonel Diallo had been working with his intelligence teams all day, and his report was grim. Sir, we've identified at least 15 different surveillance points around the palace, Amina's school, and your residence. Professional equipment, military-grade technology. Whoever is behind this has resources comparable to a state actor. State actor. General Sankara looked up from his tactical assessments. Are you suggesting this is foreign government interference? It's possible. The sophistication, the resources, the political objectives, demanding withdrawal from mining agreements with Western companies, releasing prisoners who destabilize our anti-terrorism efforts. Someone benefits significantly from our country's instability. Traoré's secure phone buzzed. A message from his wife Fatima, who had been moved to a secure location with her own protection detail. Amina is asking why she can't come home tonight. What do I tell her? He stared at the message, his heart breaking. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that her life has become a political bargaining chip? Sir, Dr. Cohn said gently, I've been analyzing the psychological profile of our adversaries based on their communication patterns and demands. This isn't just about destabilization. It's personal. The way they've targeted your family specifically, the intimate knowledge of your routines. Someone who knows you well is involved. You think it's someone in my inner circle? I think someone in your inner circle is feeding information to the real perpetrators. The question is whether it's voluntary or coerced. Traoré looked around the room at faces he had trusted with his life. Diallo, who had served with him in the military for over a decade. Sankara, who had supported the coup and helped build their new government. Dr. Cohn, who had sacrificed a lucrative private sector career to serve her country. Could one of them be betraying him? At 10:30 p.m., his phone rang again. The now familiar unknown number. Mr. President, I trust you've been considering our proposal. I need more time, Traoré said. These demands require careful consideration. You have 1 hour and 30 minutes to begin the prisoner release. The buses should already be en route to the prison. I haven't agreed to anything. Then perhaps you need additional motivation. The television screen in the conference room suddenly flickered to life, showing live footage of Amina's school, but this time, the building was dark except for a few security lights, and a lone figure could be seen walking around the perimeter. Your daughter's school has excellent security, Mr. President. Motion sensors, cameras, armed guards. But did you know that the kitchen staff arrive at 4 a.m. each morning to prepare lunch? And did you know that one of our associates has been working in that kitchen for the past 6 months? Traoré felt his blood turn to ice. If you harm innocent children, no children will be harmed if you comply with our demands. But if you don't, well, food poisoning can be such a terrible thing, especially when it affects just one specific child. The figure on the screen was now at the school's main entrance, and incredibly, the doors opened. Someone inside was letting them in. As you can see, Mr. President, we have people everywhere. Your daughter will eat lunch tomorrow, assuming she's well enough to attend school. That will depend entirely on your decision tonight. Dr. Cohn was frantically typing on her laptop, trying to contact school security, but Traoré held up his hand to stop her. The message was clear. They had infiltrated everywhere, even the places he thought were most secure. I need your answer. Now, Mr. President. Will the buses depart for the prison in 1 hour, or shall we proceed with alternative plans for your daughters tomorrow? Traoré closed his eyes, feeling the weight of leadership in a way he never had before. When he had led the coup 2 years ago, he thought the hardest decisions would be about policy, about balancing competing interests, about rebuilding institutions. He never imagined he would have to choose between his daughter's life and his nation's future. "The buses will be ready," he said quietly. "Excellent. You're learning to be practical. The first group of prisoners, the 15 high-value targets, will be released tonight. The remaining 112 will be released tomorrow night. We will provide specific instructions for each group. Where are you taking them? That's not your concern. Your only concern is compliance. Oh, and Mr. President, don't consider this a one-time transaction. Once you've demonstrated your willingness to cooperate, we may find other areas where your flexibility would be appreciated." The call ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Traoré had just agreed to release some of the most dangerous terrorists in the region, men whose capture had taken months of dangerous operations and had cost the lives of several soldiers. "Sir," Colonel Diallo said carefully, "once we release these prisoners, there's no going back. The international community will—" "The international community isn't here," Traoré snapped. "The international community isn't watching someone threaten to poison their child. The international community gets to make moral judgments from thousands of miles away while my daughter—" He stopped, taking a deep breath to compose himself. "I'm sorry. I know this is impossible for all of you too, but I can't let them hurt her." General Sankara stood up slowly. "Mr. President, with respect, I cannot be party to this decision. Releasing these prisoners will lead to attacks on civilians, on our military forces. People will die because of what we're about to do." "Hassan, please, I'm sorry, Ibrahim. I understand your position as a father, but I cannot support this as a military officer." He placed his resignation letter on the table and walked out. The room fell silent again. Dr. Cohn looked up from her laptop. "Sir, I may have found something. The call routing, the technical signatures, there are patterns that suggest the communications are being routed through servers in 3 different countries, but the original signal, it's coming from inside Burkina Faso." "How inside?" "Very inside, possibly within 100 kilometers of the capital." This was news Traoré hadn't expected. He had assumed the masterminds were foreign, operating from a safe distance. But if they were local, can you pinpoint the location? "Give me another few hours, and I might be able to narrow it down significantly." "Colonel." Diallo's radio crackled. "Sir, the prison transport buses are ready. They're awaiting your final authorization." Traoré looked at the clock. 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes until the deadline, 15 minutes to change his mind and condemn his daughter. 15 minutes to save his soul or his country. He picked up his secure phone and dialed the prison warden directly. "Colonel Ouedraogo, this is President Traoré. You are to release the following prisoners immediately and transport them to coordinates. That will be provided to you within the next 5 minutes." "Sir, are you certain? Some of these individuals—" "I am certain. This is a direct presidential order." As he read the names from the list, each one felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for. Amadou Barrow, responsible for 3 market bombings. Issouf Sawadago, who had led raids on rural villages. Omar Dicko, who had recruited child soldiers. But with each name, he pictured Amina's smile, her laughter, her dreams of becoming a doctor. Sometimes being a father meant making choices that destroyed the leader, the soldier, the man you thought. You were. At exactly midnight, 15 buses departed Ouagadougou Central Prison, carrying away 2 years of successful anti-terrorism operations and releasing men who would certainly kill again. Ibrahim Traore had just sacrificed his principles to save his daughter's life. But, as he would soon discover, this was only the beginning of the impossible choices he would be forced to make. The news broke at 6 a.m. International media outlets exploded with reports that Burkina Faso had unexpectedly released 15 high-profile terrorism suspects without explanation. By 8 a.m., Traoré's phone was ringing with calls from heads of state, international organizations, and concerned allies demanding explanations. But Traoré's immediate concern was simpler. Was Amina safe? He had barely slept, spending the night in his secure office, monitoring intelligence feeds and waiting for confirmation that the first part of the bargain had been honored. Colonel Diallo brought him coffee and a grim expression. "Sir, there's been a development. 3 of the released prisoners were killed in what appears to be an execution-style shooting about 50 kilometers north of the capital. Their bodies were found at dawn." Traoré looked up sharply. "Killed by whom?" "Unknown. But, sir, the message seems clear. Whoever orchestrated this wants those prisoners for their own purposes, not to set them free." Before Traoré could respond, his personal phone buzzed with a video message from Fatima. She was at the secure location with Amina, and his daughter was waving at the camera, seemingly healthy and happy. "Papa, Mama says you're very busy saving the country, but I drew you a picture. Look!" She held up a colorful drawing of their family standing together in front of the palace. Relief flooded through Traoré's body. She was safe. The first part of the exchange had been honored. But even as he felt gratitude, he knew he was. Now deeper in the trap, Dr. Cohn burst into the office, her laptop in hand and excitement in her voice. "Sir, I found them. At least I found where the signal is originating." She opened her laptop and showed him a map of the capital region. A red dot pulsed about 60 kilometers southeast of Ouagadougou. "The communications are coming from here. An abandoned mining facility near Cupola. But, sir, here's what's interesting. That facility was supposed to be completely shut down 2 years ago when the Australian company pulled out." "Supposed to be?" "According to our records, it was. But satellite imagery from last week shows recent activity: vehicles, temporary structures, power lines. Someone has been operating there without permits or oversight." Colonel Diallo studied the map. "Sir, I know that area. It's remote, defensible, with multiple escape routes. If someone wanted to establish a covert operations base, it would be perfect." Traoré stared at the blinking dot on the screen. His tormentors were less than an hour's drive away. They weren't foreign agents operating from a safe distance. They were right here, on Burkinabe soil, using abandoned infrastructure to blackmail his government. "How many people would it take to run an operation like this?" he asked. Dr. Cohn consulted her notes. "Based on the sophistication of their surveillance network, communications setup, and coordination of yesterday's market operation, I'd estimate between 20 and 50 people. Mix of technical specialists, security, personnel, and coordination staff. That's a significant operation to go unnoticed. Unless," Colonel Diallo said slowly, "they had help from people who knew how to avoid official scrutiny." Traoré's secure phone rang. He no longer dreaded the sound. He was beginning to feel angry instead of afraid. "Mr. President, I trust you've had a restful night?" The same electronically disguised voice, but now Traoré detected a tone of satisfaction. "I fulfilled my part of the bargain. The prisoners were released as demanded." "Yes, and we were very pleased with your compliance. However, we noticed that 3 of our associates encountered some difficulty on their journey. It seems someone decided they were more valuable dead than alive." "I had nothing to do with that?" "Of course not. But it does illustrate the dangers these men face in the current security environment. Which brings us to our next requirement: immediate withdrawal of all military forces from the northern provinces." Traoré looked at Colonel Diallo, who shook his head grimly. "That's not possible. I need time to coordinate with regional command. Arrange logistics. Time is a luxury you don't have, Mr. President. We want all forces withdrawn within 24 hours. 24 hours? That's impossible. It would take at least a week to safely extract." Then I suggest you begin immediately. Oh, and to show our continued goodwill, we have a gift for you. The television screen in Traore's office flickered to life, showing news footage from the northern city of Djibo. The reporter was standing in front of a hospital, speaking rapidly in French about a mysterious incident at a local school. 12 children were hospitalized this morning after becoming ill during breakfast at the Djibo primary school. Initial tests suggest food poisoning, though the source has not been determined. Local authorities are investigating. Traoré felt his world tilt. You poisoned children? We demonstrated our capabilities, Mr. President. The children will recover fully. They received only mild doses. But next time, if you continue to be uncooperative, the results may be more permanent. You're monsters. We're professionals, and we're proving a point. Your military forces in the north cannot protect the people you claim to serve. They couldn't even protect a school kitchen from infiltration. How can they protect villages from terrorist attacks? The logic was twisted but effective. Traoré realized. This wasn't just about releasing prisoners or withdrawing forces. It was about demonstrating the government's complete ineffectiveness to protect its own people. Begin the withdrawal immediately, Mr. President. We will be monitoring military communications to ensure compliance. Any attempt to delay or create false movements will result in more serious consequences. I need guarantees that no more children will be harmed. Children's safety depends entirely on your cooperation. Oh, and Mr. President, we've taken the liberty of scheduling a press conference for you this afternoon at 2 p.m. You will announce the northern withdrawal as a strategic redeployment to focus on more pressing domestic priorities. I haven't agreed to any press conference. You have now. The media has already been notified. International reporters are flying in. You wouldn't want to disappoint them by not appearing, would you? The line went dead, leaving Traoré staring at the continuing news coverage of sick children. In Djibo, his hands were shaking with rage. Sir, Dr. Cohn said quietly, we could mobilize a strike team to hit that location near Cupola. If we move fast and risk them carrying out their threat against Amina, against more children? Traoré shook his head. No. They've demonstrated they have people everywhere. In our military communications, in school kitchens, possibly in this room for all we know. Colonel Diallo looked stricken. Sir, you can't seriously be considering withdrawing from the north. The security implications alone. The security implications of dead children are worse than the security implications of military redeployment, Traoré snapped. At least this way people live. But even as he said it, Traoré knew he was rationalizing. The northern provinces would become safe havens for terrorists. The mining operations would fall under the control of whoever was orchestrating this blackmail, and his daughter would grow up in a country he had been forced to destroy to save her life. At 2 p.m., President Ibrahim Traore stood before an assembly of international media and announced that Burkina Faso was strategically redeploying its military forces to focus on domestic infrastructure protection. He spoke about new priorities, changing security needs, and the government's commitment to protecting all citizens. But inside, he felt like a man reading his own country's death warrant. That evening, as military convoys began their withdrawal from the northern provinces, 3 more villages were attacked by armed groups. 17 people died, including 5 children. Ibrahim Traore had saved his daughter by sacrificing his nation, and the worst part was knowing that tomorrow they would demand even more. By the 3rd day, Burkina Faso was in chaos. The military withdrawal from the northern provinces had created a power vacuum that armed groups were quickly filling. International headlines screamed about the mysterious policy reversal in one of West Africa's most stable nations. Emergency sessions of the African Union and UN Security Council were debating intervention options. But in the presidential palace, Traoré was focused on a different crisis. Dr. Cohn had made a breakthrough that changed everything. Sir, I've been Analyzing the electronic signatures from all communications, cross-referencing with access logs to our secure systems, she said, her laptop displaying complex data streams. The person feeding information to our adversaries isn't just someone with access to classified information. It's someone with administrative access to our most secure systems. How many people have that level of access? 12. Yourself, myself, Colonel Diallo, the Ministers of Defense and Interior, the heads of military intelligence, the communications director, and... She paused, her face growing pale. Who, Marie? General Sankara. Traoré felt the room spin around him. Hassan Sankara, his oldest friend, his brother in arms, the man who had stood beside him during the coup and helped build their new government. That's impossible. Hassan resigned. In protest, he refused to be part of releasing the prison. Sir, that might have been theater. Think about it. He was the only one who knew your exact schedule for the market visit. He had access to all security protocols. He knew the locations of safe houses, security procedures, everything. Colonel Diallo was studying the data on Dr. Cohn's screen. His resignation could have been calculated. Make himself appear to be in opposition while actually orchestrating the entire operation. Traoré sank into his chair, memories flooding back. Hassan had been unusually interested in Amina's school schedule recently, asking detailed questions about her activities under the guise of improving security. He had also been the one to suggest the market visit that morning, claiming it would be good for public relations. But why? Traoré asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. Hassan has been my closest friend for 15 years. We've fought together, bled together. Sir, Dr. Cohn interrupted. There's more. I've been tracking financial records, and General Sankara received a significant payment 3 months ago from a shell company registered in Ghana, the same shell company that has connections to the abandoned mining facility. The betrayal hit Traoré like a physical blow. Hassan hadn't just betrayed the government. He had betrayed their friendship, their shared vision for the country, and most painfully, he had put Amina's life at risk for money. How much? Traoré asked quietly. $2 million with promises of more based on performance milestones. Traoré's secure phone rang. This time, when he answered, he thought he detected something familiar in the electronically disguised voice. A slight accent, a particular way of pronouncing certain words that reminded him of late-night strategy sessions during their military days. Mr. President, I trust you're pleased with how smoothly the military withdrawal is proceeding. Hassan. Traoré said the name quietly, but with absolute certainty. There was a long pause. Then the electronic distortion was switched off, and Hassan Sankara's familiar voice came through clearly. Hello, old friend. Colonel Diallo and Dr. Cohn exchanged shocked glances, but Traoré felt only a cold, deep rage settling in his chest. Why, Hassan? Why would you do this to me? To the country? To Amina? Because you were destroying everything we fought for, Ibrahim. You were turning us into puppets of the West, selling our resources to foreign companies, allowing French military bases on our soil. This wasn't the revolution we planned. So you decided to sell us to different masters instead? Hassan's laugh was bitter. These aren't masters, Ibrahim. They're partners, people who understand that Africa's resources should benefit Africans, not multinational corporations. And the children you poisoned? The villages that were attacked after our withdrawal? How do those benefit Africans? Sacrifices, Ibrahim. Sometimes change requires sacrifice. You of all people should understand that. You overthrew a government, remember? I overthrew a corrupt government to help our people, not to terrorize children. And I'm overthrowing a naive president who doesn't understand the real game being played. Do you think the French, the Americans, the Chinese care about your high-minded ideals? They want our gold, our uranium, our strategic position. At least, my partners are honest about it. Traoré felt something breaking inside him. This wasn't just political betrayal. This was the destruction of everything he had believed about friendship, loyalty, shared purpose. Your partners? Who are they, Hassan? Who paid you to betray your own country? People with vision, Ibrahim. People who understand that this colonial system has to end, even if it means breaking a few eggs, even if it means breaking you. And Amina? She's just a broken egg to you? For the first time, Hassan's voice wavered. Amina was never supposed to be in real danger. The threats were meant to be psychological pressure, nothing more. Tell that to the children in the hospital in Jibo. That was a demonstration that got out of hand. But Ibrahim, listen to me. You can still end this. One more demand, and your daughter goes back to her normal life. What demand? The mining contracts. Sign them over to our designated representatives. All of them. Gold, uranium, phosphates, everything. Traoré understood now. This had never been about terrorism or politics. It had been about money. Massive generational wealth from Burkina Faso's natural resources. Hassan and his partners were orchestrating a transfer of the nation's mineral wealth to themselves. You're asking me to sign over the future of our country. I'm asking you to be practical, sign the contracts, and tomorrow morning Amina goes to school normally. Your wife goes back to her hospital work. You continue being president of a stable, peaceful country. Everyone wins. Except the people of Burkina Faso. The people of Burkina Faso will be fed, housed, employed by the new mining operations. They'll benefit more from this arrangement than they ever would from foreign corporations extracting wealth and leaving nothing behind. Colonel Diallo was frantically writing notes, trying to coordinate with security forces to trace the call and potentially launch a rescue operation, but Traoré held up his hand to stop him. He had a different plan forming. Hassan, I want to see you, face to face, before I make this decision. That's not possible, Ibrahim. Too risky. Then there's no deal. You want me to sign over my country's future, you look me in the eye when you ask for it. There was a long pause. You're not in a position to make demands, old friend. Yes, I am, because you need my signature on those documents, and you need it to look legitimate. If I'm killed, or if Amina is harmed, those contracts become worthless. International law, succession protocols, you know how this works. Another pause, longer this time. 1 hour. The old training facility outside Koudougou. Come alone. I'll bring Colonel Diallo. No, just you and Ibrahim. Any sign of military action? Any hint of a rescue operation? And the deal is off permanently. The call ended. Traoré looked at his watch. 4 p.m. 1 hour to drive to a location where he would face the man who had been his closest friend and was now his greatest enemy. Sir, this is obviously a trap, Colonel Diallo said. We should mobilize a full tactical team. No. Hassan was right about one thing. He needs those signatures to be legitimate. Killing me accomplishes nothing for him. But this might be our only chance to end this without more bloodshed. Dr. Cohn looked up from her laptop. Sir, I've located the exact facility. It's isolated, but I can coordinate satellite surveillance, maybe identify weak points in their security. Marie, I need you to do something else. I need you to prepare. 2 sets of documents. The mining contracts Hassan wants exactly as he's specified, but also... Traoré paused, an idea forming. Also prepare a confession. Everything we know about Hassan's involvement, the payments, the shell companies. If something happens to me, I want the truth to come out. As Traoré prepared to leave the palace, possibly for the last time, he called his wife on the secure line. Fatima, I need you to know that I love you and Amina more than my own life. But I also love this country, and I can't let it be destroyed, even to save our daughter. Ibrahim, what are you planning? I'm going to try to save them both. But if I can't, if something happens to me, promise me you'll make sure Amina knows that her father died trying to do what was right. Nothing is going to happen to you. You're going to fix this and we're going to go home together. But as Traoré hung up and walked to his armored vehicle, he knew that the next few hours would determine not just his family's fate, but the future of Burkina Faso itself. The drive to Koudougou took 45 minutes through the dusty landscape of central Burkina Faso. As they approached the abandoned military training facility, Traoré could see why Hassan had chosen it, remote, defensible, with clear sight lines in all directions. At exactly 5 p.m., Ibrahim Traore walked alone into a confrontation that would test everything he believed about friendship, sacrifice, and the price of leadership. The abandoned military training facility at Koudougou looked exactly as Traoré remembered it from his officer training days 20 years earlier. The same concrete buildings, the same red dirt parade ground, the same sense of isolation that made it perfect for both military exercises and clandestine meetings. Hassan was waiting in the old command center, looking older than his 40 years, but still carrying the bearing of a professional soldier. He wasn't alone. 4 armed men in civilian clothes positioned themselves around the room, their weapons visible but not directly threatening. "Ibrahim," Hassan said, standing as his former friend entered. "You look tired. 3 days of being terrorized by my closest friend will do that to a person. Sit down. We have a lot to discuss and not much time." Traoré took the chair across from Hassan at a metal table that had probably been used for mission briefings when this facility was active. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were planning their final mission together, just not on the same side. "I brought the contracts," Traoré said, placing a folder on the table. "But I want answers first. How long have you been planning this?" Hassan opened a bottle of water and took a long drink before responding. "Planning what? Saving our country from neo-colonial exploitation? Since the day we took power, Ibrahim. You just never understood the bigger picture. The bigger picture of betraying everything we stood for. We stood for African independence, African control of African resources. But you got seduced by Western aid packages and diplomatic recognition. You started believing their promises about responsible development and international partnerships." Hassan leaned forward, his eyes intense with the passion Traoré remembered from their younger days. "Do you know what those Australian and Canadian mining companies were taking out of our northern provinces? $2 billion worth of gold last year alone. Do you know how much Burkina Faso received in taxes and royalties? 47 million dollars. That's a standard international rate. It's robbery. And you facilitated it because you wanted to be the responsible African leader that the West could point to as a success story." Traoré felt the familiar weight of leadership decisions, the constant balancing act between idealism and pragmatism. "So your solution was to orchestrate a criminal conspiracy? To threaten children?" Hassan's face darkened. "The threats to children were never supposed to be real. That was overzealousness by some of our partners. Partners who pay you $2 million to betray your country. Partners who understand that sometimes you have to break the system to rebuild it properly." Hassan stood and walked to the window overlooking the empty parade ground. "Do you remember what we promised each other during the coup planning? That we would never let foreign interests control Burkina Faso again?" "I remember. I also remember promising to protect our people, not terrorize them. Sometimes protection requires harsh measures, Ibrahim. You know that from our military days." Traoré opened the folder and spread the mining contracts across the table. "These contracts transfer control of every major mineral deposit in the country to shell companies registered in Ghana, Mali, and Côte d'Ivoire. Who really controls these companies, Hassan? People who will reinvest the profits in African development instead of sending them to shareholders in Toronto and Sydney." "That's not an answer." Hassan turned back to face him, and for a moment, Traoré saw something that looked like shame in his old friend's eyes. A consortium of investors, some African, some Middle Eastern, some Chinese. People who understand long-term strategic thinking instead of quarterly profit reports. And how much of those profits do you personally receive? Enough to ensure my family's security for generations. Enough to fund the kind of development projects you never had the courage to implement. Development projects funded by extortion. And terrorism? Funded by African resources controlled by Africans instead of foreigners. The circular logic was maddening, but Traoré recognized something deeper in Hassan's reasoning. His old friend had convinced himself that personal profit and national liberation were the same thing. It was a seductive form of self-deception that made betrayal feel like patriotism. "Show me the proof that Amina is safe," Traoré said. Hassan nodded to one of his men, who produced a tablet displaying live video feed. Amina was in the secure location with her mother, playing with dolls, and apparently unaware that her life hung in the balance. "She's beautiful, Ibrahim. She has your eyes, but Fatima's spirit. She's going to grow up to be an extraordinary woman. If you let her grow up at all. Sign the contracts and she grows up normally. Refuse and—" Hassan shrugged. "Well, you understand the alternatives." Traoré picked up the pen Hassan had placed beside the contracts. The weight of it felt enormous, as if he were holding the entire future of his nation in his hand. "Before I sign, I want you to know something, Hassan. I've figured out where your operation is based, the abandoned mine near Kupela. I know about your communication setup, your personnel, your escape routes." Hassan's eyes narrowed. "If you're thinking about some kind of rescue operation, I'm thinking about justice. Not just for what you've done to me and my family, but for what you've done to our country. Ibrahim, be very careful. My people have strict instructions." "Your people are surrounded." Hassan went completely still. "What? Did you really think I would come here alone and defenseless? Did you think I hadn't learned anything from 20 years of military service?" Traoré reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, a GPS transponder that had been broadcasting his location throughout the journey. "Colonel Diallo has had teams moving into position for the last hour. The mine facility near Kupela is being raided as we speak. Your entire operation is being dismantled." One of Hassan's men started to raise his weapon, but Hassan held up his hand to stop him. "You're bluffing. Any military action and your daughter dies anyway, once you have what you want. Did you really think I trusted you to honor this agreement? Did you think I believed you would just walk away and leave my family alone?" Hassan's face had gone pale. "Ibrahim, if you've done what I think you've done, I've called your bluff, old friend. Your entire plan depended on me believing that compliance would guarantee safety, but you and I both know that witnesses to extortion don't usually live to tell about it." Traoré stood up, leaving the unsigned contracts on the table. "I'm not signing anything, and if anything happens to my daughter, to my wife, to any other innocent person, you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell thinking about what you threw away for money." Hassan's radio crackled with urgent voices speaking in rapid French. Traoré could make out enough to understand that the mine facility was indeed under assault, and Hassan's people were either surrendering or fleeing. "You've destroyed everything," Hassan said quietly. "No, Hassan. You destroyed everything. I'm trying to save what's left." One of Hassan's men approached him and whispered something urgent. Hassan's shoulders sagged as he realized the full scope of what was happening. "The game's over, brother," Traoré said, using the old term of affection from their military days. "Your people at the school kitchen, your surveillance teams, your communications network, it's all being rolled up simultaneously. Dr. Cohn spent the last 2 days mapping your entire operation." "You have no idea what you've unleashed," Hassan said. "The people I was working with don't forgive failure. They don't accept defeat. If they can't get what they want through me, then we'll deal with them the same way we're dealing with you. As enemies of Burkina Faso." Hassan looked at his former friend with something that might have been respect. "You were always better at the long game than I gave you credit for." "I learned from a good teacher. You taught me to think 3 moves. Ahead to always have a backup plan. You just forgot that I was paying attention. Colonel Diallo's voice crackled over Traore's radio. Mr. President, we have confirmation. The Kupela facility is secure, and we have 12 suspects in custody. Miss Amina and your wife are safe and en route back to the palace. Relief flooded through Traore's body, followed immediately by exhaustion. 3 days of impossible choices, of sacrificing principles for family, of wondering if he was saving or destroying his country. It was finally over. Hassan Sankara, Traoré said formally, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, extortion, and terrorism against the Republic of Burkina Faso. As Hassan was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Traoré one last time. You won this round, Ibrahim. But the forces I was working with are bigger than one man, bigger than one operation. This isn't over. Maybe not, Traoré replied. But at least now we know who our real enemies are. 6 months later, President Ibrahim Traoré stood in the same market where the crisis had begun, watching his daughter help select mangoes from the same vendor who had offered them as a gift. The security presence was more subtle now, but still vigilant. The trust that had been broken could be rebuilt, but it would take time. The international community had eventually understood and supported Traoré's actions once the full scope of Hassan's conspiracy was revealed. The mining contracts were renegotiated to provide fairer terms for Burkina Faso, and the military had returned to the northern provinces with renewed purpose and better intelligence. Hassan Sankara was serving a life sentence. But his warnings had proven prophetic. 3 more coup attempts had been discovered and thwarted, each linked to foreign interests seeking to destabilize the government. The price of independence, it seemed, was constant vigilance. Papa, Amina said, tugging on his sleeve. The mango. Man wants to know if you're proud of me. Traoré looked down at his daughter, healthy, happy, alive, and then at the vendor, who had become something of a local celebrity for being present during the market incident that had started everything. Tell him, Traoré said, that I'm proud of all of us. We faced an impossible choice, and we found a way to choose everything we believed in. As they walked through the bustling market, father and daughter together, Traoré reflected on the lesson he had learned during those 3 terrible days. Leadership wasn't about making perfect choices. It was about refusing to accept that any choice was truly impossible. Sometimes, with enough courage, wisdom, and careful planning, you could save both your family and your country. Sometimes you could choose love and duty, principles and pragmatism. Sometimes, you could have it all. But the price was never knowing when the next impossible choice would present itself and having the strength to face it when it did. Ibrahim Traoré had learned that lesson well, and he would be ready. The end.